Welcome back, Attack. Today is kind of a sad day, actually. It's a sad occasion where this year we look back in remembrance of a bunch of games that have shut down this year. Now, some of these games actually really deserved it, but some of them, especially more toward the top of the list, I really think could have done well if they just were allowed to live. This is going to be a top 10 of the shutdown games of 2015, and we're ranking them based on their potential. Some of these games were loved, and some of them were hated, true. But either way, it's always sad to see a game lose all of its potential. These are the games that you can't play, or won't be able to, pretty soon, anymore. Starting off our list, we've got Diesel, which was supposed to be something like a Gears of War clone, but for free-to-play. It was supposed to have like really interesting characters instead of normal loadouts. But in the end, we got something that was really half-assed. It didn't have any real number of characters. There was like no maps. The maps were really shitty. It had nowhere near the actual like feel of Gears of War. It just didn't have that at all. It just totally looked like a cheap knockoff. I can't imagine anybody spending any money on this game, and I'm guessing that's what happened because it couldn't even afford to keep its servers up, and it shut down. At number 9 on the list is Fear Online, which actually had some really unique ideas, especially in terms of the co-op mode that it had, which kind of makes sense. You know, Fear was a single-player game, so a co-op mode would have been freaking awesome, but in the end, it was some sort of like knockoff zombie mode thing. I don't know, it was really weird. The game entirely was arcadey, and it totally ripped off other free-to-play shooters that came before it. It did nothing new other than its co-op mode, which the game probably should have just focused on that and actually evolved that, but instead the game was just kind of crap. Fear Online could have been great. It was a good franchise, but this rendition of the franchise was bad. Number 8 on the list is Need for Speed World, which is going to start our countdown of the EA free-to-play games that are being shut down, because EA is actually shutting down a whole slew of them. But Need for Speed World really flew under the radar because it wasn't phenomenal. It wasn't the worst game ever, but seriously, they also had their AAA games just constantly being spammed out, and the franchise wasn't doing great at that time. Other than occasional, maybe one or two that was actually decent, there's just nothing super amazing about it. And so Need for Speed World, kind of had the same affliction to it all around. EA itself, it wasn't getting much good news either. So I guess that's why Need for Speed World and the following on the list have been shut down. Number 7, another EA title, is FIFA World, which was kind of renowned. A lot of people played it for a while, but the staple FIFA series was actually significantly more popular. Now, one thing that could have hindered FIFA World was the fact that the FIFA organization was kind of getting scrutinized. There's all the whole schemes and everything that they were doing, all the sort of bad, evil dictator kind of things going on behind the scenes. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the video game. FIFA World was just just kind of like a lesser version. Essentially, it was like they took some of the assets from some of the older games, kind of just put it as a free-to-play, which is so EA, and in the end, it did not pay off for them. And number 6 is a game that I actually spent a lot of time on, and I thought it was going to last pretty much forever, and that's Battlefield Heroes. Number 6, guys! Wow, Battlefield Heroes was actually pretty cool. This is starting on the list where things could have potentially been much better. So Battlefield Heroes, I'm very positive about this game. It was kind of reminiscent of Team Fortress 2. It was really cartoony, it was really silly, it was definitely very different from the usual Battlefield series, but what's really cool is that it ran on lesser machines, anybody could play it, and it had all the vehicles that you would want. I mean, it wasn't as visceral as Battlefield 2 or any of the other PC Battlefields, but it was really cartoon, it was really silly, and it wasn't horrible for the time. Of course, it didn't age that well. It didn't age anywhere near as well as Team Fortress 2 has, which is definitely the problem. EA kind of gave up on it, and, well, it's just now dying, even though it could have been something so much more. Halfway on the list at number 5 is Battlefield Play for Free. Now, this concept is very easily taken advantage of, okay? The idea of taking older pay-to-play games like Battlefield 2 and then transferring them over into the free-to-play market. The problem that occurred with Battlefield Play for Free is that they dramatically changed the game. It was very similar to Battlefield 2, and to somebody who just started playing, it basically was Battlefield 2. However, the monetization, which was essentially pay to win, it was basically pay to win. And then they just limited so much, it didn't run as well either. They just changed way too much about it. They should have just made the game free, filled up them servers. There's so many things that they could have done, and Battlefield Play for Free technically was a cool game, but EA's greed ruined it. At number 4, we have the Monster Hunter inspired MMORPG, and that's RAIDERZ or RAIDERZ. Now, this game was one of the very first games I ever did a first impression on professionally. I didn't know what I was getting into, and I actually had some memorable moments. It was actually really interesting and really cool, at least starting out. Yeah, it was super clunky and awkward. Of course, it was like the first action MMORPG. It was super instanced and all that good stuff. And basically, what just really sucked is that a bunch of really awesome games came out in vain of RAIDERZ. So for one would be like Terra, and Terra then went free to play, and then all these other games went free to play and just completely overshadowed RAIDERZ and other free to play games that were of, a lesser quality, like a B movie quality. And it just sucks because RAIDERZ, if it was allowed to grow in that environment, it could have maybe become something cool. Instead, now you just can't even play it at all. On to the big 3 with Transformers Universe. Ever since I was a child, I have been such a huge nerd for Transformers. The toys were freaking awesome, and all I ever wanted to do was to battle freaking Transformers with other Transformers, and Transformers Universe was totally promising us that. But it didn't happen. It didn't even happen for Jagex the way they wanted to. They wanted to make it an MMO, but then they wanted to put it into arenas. So what's more arena than MOBA? They wanted to make a MOBA. But then they kind of had all these MMO ideas and concepts, and I think that idea could still work. It works in Heroes and Generals. You can have little instances and then kind of have an overarching map and story and progression, or like kind of tally system, and they were kind of doing that with Decepticons versus Autobots, but in the end it didn't work out. It was too casual for the MOBA scene, but at the same time it wasn't fun or silly or casual enough. It just really didn't hit its mark. Jagex knew it wasn't, and so they scrapped it. And at number 2 on the list, we've got Infinite Crisis. So for shutdown, free-to-play games of 2015, Infinite Crisis is pretty much the most recent, and it really sucks because Infinite Crisis had a huge amount of potential with its backing of the DC Universe. And I don't mean just any one comic or couple of comics, it's literally the entire universe and maybe even more, the expanded universes. I mean, you could play as alternate dimension freaking Batman, whatever. You could do all sorts of different stuff with these characters, but the problem is that theoretically you could do all these different things. You could fight in pit and battle against other heroes and villains, but the truth is that mechanically, Infinite Crisis really wasn't that different. It didn't really do anything new. It was just kind of like skinned. It was just new skins. So theoretically you can have all these different Batmen, but they just didn't really have that much life or flavor to them to really carry the fact that all the mechanics and skill shots and all the abilities of these characters were totally borrowed from other games. And the number 1 on our list for shutdown free-to-play games of this year, 2015, we have to give it to Dawngate. Now, this is a game that I was personally invested with, and a lot of other people were too. The developers even had an ongoing comic series. More than any other free-to-play game, let alone MOBA, Dawngate had the best story, despite not actually having a story mode. Dawngate also challenged exactly what is a MOBA by adding in some very interesting strategic elements, as well as totally focusing on breaking the meta. They were obviously inspired by League of Legends, just as League of Legends was inspired by Dota, and they were attempting to change the game. However, they kind of missed their mark. Despite being strategically different from League of Legends, it really didn't have any mechanics to back it up, and at the same time, it was pretty much the same tactics. You really didn't break any metas with this game. More often than not, it really did just kind of feel like a lesser League of Legends clone. Despite its potential, if this game released, I fully believe that it could have been something amazing, just like we see Heroes of the Storm turning into. However, it's dead now. Now, this is a game that was trying to dig into the already saturated MOBA market, but instead, again, EA showed us that this game had just dug its own grave. It wasn't too different, but it was also not similar enough in the ways that people wanted. It did not hit its mark. I know that, and that's the case for a lot of these games, but also, same with a lot of these games, they didn't live long enough to really try to readjust their aim. Well, that's all said and done. Yeah, these are the shutdown games of 2015. At least the top 10 that we think could have maybe have done something with themselves. I don't know. Not too many games have really redeemed themselves from being shut down. It's not too often that a franchise gets picked up and even made anew, like we saw with Tribes Ascend, but then again, you know, Tribes Ascend isn't doing too well. I expect that to be on the list next year. But if you guys have any shutdown games that you want to mention or kind of shout out to the world here one last time, go ahead and do that in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe so you can stay notified of if a game is shutting down, maybe, and also all sorts of new games coming out, yeah, and top 10s and funny, awesome videos that I make. Please come back, Attack. Look forward to the next video. We look forward to seeing you there. Welcome back, Attack. Today we're going to be talking about the top 10 free-to-play MMOs for this year, for 2015, and I think across all the genres for free-to-plays, we've seen so much innovation in MOBAs, in MMOs, in like card games. We've seen so many new things this past year, and hopefully, maybe, probably so, 2015 is going to be just as exciting.